Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 102nd Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'd like to discuss, well, I called it Galactic Consciousness, but it's really about trying to demystify what various beings, entities, angels, Jesus, Buddha, demons, and all of that could be. Try to give them a form which is intuitive and understandable for our current sort of level of consciousness. So basically, and of course, I hope you've watched my previous videos because I'll be drawing heavily on all of those, is that if, for instance, human beings, the collective of all human beings, basically, if each one is a cell inside some kind of global organism, which once it functions in a harmonious way, then brings about a planetary consciousness, which means a being which emerges from the harmonious interactions of 9 billion plus people, plus all the animals, plants, and everything. And that all of that is like a body with its neurons, which would be kind of, I would guess that each human is like one neuron in the brain of the planetary consciousness. And then, the rocks is its skeleton, it's the non-movable parts. And then, the animals can be whatever, enzymes, red blood cells. I don't really care, but it's the principle that counts. The logic, the underlying logic is what's really important, not the form. Forget the form. So, what we call, for instance, an angel or Jesus, we consider these as separate entities. So, for instance, we have different kind of angels, like the angel of, death, the angel of, I don't know, love, the angel of whatever, peace, the angel of joy, and God knows what. I mean, maybe I'm making some of these up, but you get the pictures that we have all kinds of different angels, like Angel Michael, Angel Gabriel, Angel whatever, and they all have different sort of traits and functions and personalities, and they do different things. At least that's what you learn in the spiritual realm and spiritual sort of circles. But what if these entities are actually part of a collective consciousness themselves? So, Jesus or the angels. And so, basically, just here is the little thought experiment. Imagine an ant, and it's, living about its life, whatever. And then there's this human that, comes to the rescue of the ant because it's being, I don't know, stuck under a rock or something. And it reaches down with its hand and then saves the little ant. And then the ant thanks your index finger, which it calls angel savior, for helping it, because it cannot actually understand or perceive that what is saving it is the entire collective organism. It only perceives, these two fingers that actually picked it up or picked the stone up to free it. And, so imagine if the ant were a human and the human is a galactic consciousness. That is, imagine a galaxy, an entire galaxy, which is conscious of itself. And all of the different civilizations that compose it, like alien civilization and all that, all of those are but cells inside its global organism. And that consciousness then has entities, which we would call, for instance, from our perspective, angels, which it sends in various places inside of its own body to help, where there are problems. Just like your body, for instance, if you have a wound or something in your finger, it sends white cells, and all kinds of healing towards that wound. Um, and so, from the perspective of the cells that are suffering from a cut, for instance, on your hand, receiving, the help of white cells can be perceived as or understood as angels coming to the rescue. Well, actually, um, that's it's actually a level above it. So, for instance, it's more like how should I put it? This like it's really very high level. So it would be more like from the perspective of a plant that is suffering of fire, for instance, that we dump water on it from our airplane. When you have a forest fire, for instance, um, that there's a big sort of gap between the plant consciousness and the human consciousness, enough so that the plant consciousness would never be able to sort of understand the cause and consequence, the cause and effect kind of relationships between what's happening, that the forest is burning, and the fact that humans dumped some water on it to save it. It wouldn't be able to understand the form, what's really happening. Um, but it received some help and it just doesn't know, it cannot give a form as to how that help was received. And the same for an angel, for instance. It would be very hard for us humans to give a form to the kind of help that we're getting from them. Now we call it like, energy, or, good vibes, good vibrations, positive vibrations, and whatnot, which is actually, when you think about it, since everything is just exchange of information in the universe, there isn't anything else. Everything is an exchange of vibrations. And so when a human sort of goes on an airplane and dumps some water on a forest fire, that is good vibes. That is, it's just that it takes the form of something material, but underneath the form, behind all forms, is just vibration and an exchange of information. Um, and so, what I meant to say here in this video is that um, this galactic consciousness, the angels, Jesus, the Buddha, all kinds of entities. Maybe the Buddha is even above galactic consciousness, but the various entities, we call them these names, but they're not necessarily separate. They might be the same as, separating artificially different parts of your body. And like if the ant wanted help from the human to get information on, for instance, if there are obstacles or dangers ahead, then it would call angel eye, all seeing eye, because the human can see, what the ant cannot see. And then it could try to distill that information in a way that the ant would understand. And then the eye would thank the eye angel, saying, "Wow, thank you so much for your insight." Um, but it's just a practical sort of form for the ant to be able to interact with a human, because asking the human as a global entity is way out of the ant's understanding and comprehension. And so it artificially breaks down and separates the different parts of the human according to what it thinks um, can help. So, like the index and the hand, for instance, can help move things. The eye can see things, and it would not consider that this is like one global entity. Um, and also, kind of what's misunderstood, I think, in many circles is that we are inside the body of the solar system. We are in, well, first of all, we're inside of the planetary consciousness. So we are but cells inside the planetary consciousness. And then we're also but a cell, the whole planetary consciousness, in the solar system's consciousness. And then the solar system is just but one cell in the galactic consciousness, which considers everything that's inside of it as its body, as something that is inside as opposed to outside. So it's not really helping. It's not like when you help your friend or you help somebody on the outside, you're not considering, well, most people wouldn't consider that they're helping themselves. But when you're having trouble with your stomach or with everything, when you send some healing energies or whatever to yourself, you're doing it to yourself and you're really conscious of that. And so that's the way it is with this galactic consciousness. And then it is the level of consciousness of humans which blocks healing and helping. So imagine it like this. Imagine if you are a unicellular organism and your level of consciousness is evolving towards identifying with the fact that you're part of a body and you're on this threshold. And so you're still kind of stuck in this old belief system and consciousness level where you deem yourself to be separated from other cells, and you don't recognize that you're part of a collective sort of global organism. And so inside the human, there are plenty of mechanisms to help each cell. Like, for instance, it can send oxygen and energy to each and every cell through the heart and the circulatory system. But imagine that the cell is sort of popping in and out of quote unquote existence inside that body. So sometimes it's here, and sometimes it's in another realm where it's separated from the body. It's almost as if this human is like a baby in a womb, rather. Um, and its cells are not yet conscious that they're part of the baby, and they are in two kind of dimensions, between two dimensions. One where they still kind of quote unquote believe that they're separate, and one where they're starting to have the intuition that they're part of something big. And so sometimes they have access to the help, oxygen, for instance, like resources, enzymes, and whatnot. And sometimes they're cut off from it. But the difference is simply their state of consciousness. That's what makes the difference, not any kind of physical and material obstacles. And that's also something that I think is kind of misunderstood. So, for instance, an angel, the reason why it can't help you is not because it's not trying, It's because you yourself place yourself outside of the angel's influence and reach. It's like a skin cell, the moment that it leaves your hand and it detaches from your hand, it can no longer receive all the benefits of being part of your hand or being part of your body. It has to then sort of fend on its own. And you, as the collective global organism, if you're really, 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 really trying, you can try to help that cell artificially by using tools and microscopes and whatnot, and trying to feed it artificially with energy with a syringe, or trying to place it in a, you know, in a better environment, or protect it or whatever. But the possibilities for you as a global organism to help it when it's outside of your, when it considers itself to be outside of your body, is infinitely smaller than the possibilities that you have to help it when it identifies as being part of your body. Because then there's so many mechanisms that are built into your body to help that cell thrive. And so when you're kind of on the fence here and you're in between, then the help you're getting, people would call this synchronicities. So the thing where, for instance, you meet just the right person at just the right time, or certain events just unfold one after the other that look like very, very good coincidences. And that is because if you're a cell of that global organism, then so are all other humans. And so you get to see the version of those humans that are aligned with that level of consciousness, and where they conspire for your greater good because you also conspire for their greater good. And that's basically, you could say that a global organism is just a synchronicity, a perpetual a perpetual synchronicity, where every single heartbeat is a synchronicity. And you're living in that state permanently. Like your cells are living in that kind of state on a permanent basis. And so that's basically what happens, I think. So it's not a lack for these beings to try to help us. It's just that we place ourselves out of their out of their sphere of influence, if you like. And the lower you sink in terms of consciousness, the more you're persuaded that you're separate, the more hermetic you are, the more impervious you are to the help of all the sort of conscious beings and organisms and levels above you. And then also there is the question of the level, which is really important. Because if you reach out to a galactic consciousness, it is extremely far remote from you as a human. And so it wouldn't know really how to help you specifically as a human, because you're so far off from its level of consciousness. It's like, so for instance, from the perspective of a galactic consciousness, it can control very, very big and broad things. Like, for instance, it would perceive things in orders of magnitude of thousands of years. So from its perspective, 1,000 years of human life would be like a few heartbeats for us, a few seconds. And it would set up a few, big sort of overarching themes that humanity is going to, set the global theme for the evolution of humanity. Just like, for instance, you would plan to eat some more vitamin D because you're lacking vitamin D, and then your body would feel better after a while. And that whole process that would take you a few hours, for instance, like going to the shop, getting vitamin D, swallowing it, and then being processed by the body, that from the perspective of your cells, if they were humans and the global body was the galactic consciousness, that would be like 1,000 years in human terms. So 1,000 years in cell terms, for instance. I mean, it's really hard to explain. But what I mean, why I'm saying this is because it's really important to understand these levels, because it would help you sort of be strategic when you're contacting these levels as to what they can or cannot do for you, specifically, how they can help you, what information they can give you. And so, um, like for instance, the molecules, like the proteins, for instance, that are inside your cells, or the amino acids, if they had a consciousness, probably do, and they were trying to reach out to your body for help because they feel bad or whatever, it might be actually better for them to reach out to the cell that they are a part of rather than reaching out to you as a human. Because let's say, for instance, they're lacking protein. Um, the global message is you should be eating more protein, for instance. You have to change your diet. But then the individual help they're going to get is going to go first through various stages. Like it's going to go through the stomach, then through the intestines, and then it's going to go through the bloodstream, and then, and all of these kind of steps are completely out of the perception and reach of these proteins if they need to be reinforced or whatever. It's better for them to contact the cell that they are a part of, because that is the overarching sort of the higher level from their perspective. And the human is completely out of their league. And even like organs, for instance, individual organs are also intermediary steps between the cell and the body, the whole being. And so basically, the idea here is when you want to know something specific about your life, for instance, it's pointless to ask God, for instance, or thinking that the higher you reach out in terms of dimensions, the better it is, or the more clear the message is, or whatever. That's I don't think that's correct. I think that when you're asking for the more universal the truth, of course, the better it is to reach out to the highest levels. But the more universal and absolute you get, the more vague and global it, and the less like concrete it becomes. If you want a relative truth, but that is closer to you and more sort of relevant to your daily life and what you're living day to day, and whether you should, I don't know, whether it's going to rain, whether you should make an investment and where to invest your money, or if you should start planting a garden, or what to do about some health issues, then it's not really necessarily a good idea to contact something like God or whatever, because it's just going to send you love and saying, I love you, you're part of me, and I love you. Just like your body basically is just a big bundle of love that is sending love to every single part of it, the cells and the molecules within the cells, and the atoms within the molecules, and the subparticles within the atoms. But what kind of information could one atom of your body get about what I mean, yeah, I mean, I really don't know how to explain it in a way that you would understand, but I mean, for an atom, for instance, I mean, all the movements of your body, I mean, it's just so remote from their understanding, from their level of consciousness, from their perspective, that it's not going to help them in their quite a quote unquote reality, their physical sort of interactions and the electromagnetic field that they're a part of. Um, it's not what's directly relevant and interesting to them. So like, pick wisely. What I'm trying to say is, like, pick wisely what level of consciousness you reach out to, depending on what you actually are seeking for, as far as information, as far as help, because they're not all equal. Um, and yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to cover at this stage. So I hope you found this interesting, and don't hesitate to leave comments or questions if you have any. And talk to you next time.